Hi, welcome to video 38. This is video number 10 on the Arrays, Records and Lists playlist, guys. You will have noticed that there is a big difference between the last video, which was video number 24, and this one, which is 38. I will come on to this in a little bit more detail. Essentially, this video is all about the Python list of lists. All right, and a significant part of this, guys, is going to be making a comparison with the two-dimensional array. So to summarize the purpose then, to be able to work with the Python list of lists, obviously, but also to understand the differences and similarities of a Python list of lists with a traditional two-dimensional array. Guys, please notice, okay, at the bottom it says on the slide, this video is designed to support your practical programming project because you are not going to be tested in an exam specifically on the characteristics and properties of a Python list or list of lists. All right, this is not a data structure that you are required to know for your computer science theory. More on that on the next slide, guys. Okay, so the reason that the last video was video number 24 and this is 38, guys, is because all of the videos that I've put together really have been about supporting the theory component of your programming on the GCSE computer science with practical experience, putting the theory to practice using the Python programming language. We're now with video 38 getting into the space where we're moving away from the theory that you need to know for your GCSE course and stuff which is really useful for you to take into your practical programming project. But there is a caveat to this, guys, and by all means use this video, go through it, benefit from it, but please don't get confused between the Python list and the Python array, because whilst there are some similarities, particularly in the way that you conceptualize the structure, there are some big differences between the two. And in an exam, I don't want you to answer the questions wrongly because you're thinking about a Python list instead of a traditional array. So just to summarize, guys, okay, we use Python lists to emulate the traditional two-dimensional array, okay, because Python doesn't have arrays as a built-in part of the programming language. It doesn't use them. Python lists are not of a fixed size. They are dynamic, which means you can add elements to them and delete elements to them to your heart's content. You can make them as big as you want to. They are not restricted to a specific data type and they don't need to be initialized with null values. All of that, guys, is the opposite to the traditional array data structure. The traditional array data structure must be of the same data type. You can have an array of strings or integers, but not both. An array data structure must have a fixed size, and once you fix the size, you cannot add extra elements to it. You cannot delete items from an array either. And if at the beginning of your program you need to initialize an array, you have to initialize it with null values. If you don't have any real values to put into your array and you just want to declare it and initialize it to be used later on, you have to initialize it with null values. So those null values become placeholder values which you simply replace. And that is why with the traditional array data structure we don't have the append function to add an item to it. We simply replace an existing null value. Okay, all of that is the complete opposite of the Python list. So as I say, guys, please try not to get the two mixed up. It is a little bit unfortunate because at this moment in time in 2020, a lot of programming languages do in fact have something very similar to the Python list. They have a list data structure. Java has a wonderful collection of lists, dynamic lists and arrays, all of which are very closely related to each other. So Python is not the only language which has a list, okay, data structure, but unfortunately at the moment the GCSE computer science course does not have any other types of data structures for you to learn about apart from the array. So maybe at some point in the future it will include the list data structure to supplement the array, or maybe it will replace the traditional array with a list. Who knows, guys? Now in your exam you may be given examples to work with in your exam which test your knowledge of the traditional array data structure, but you are not going to be asked an exam question which is specifically about the Python list, okay, because it is not included in the data structure part of your computer programming theory. Okay, so like I said, guys, really this is all about supporting some really great Python programming solutions in your practical programming project. All right, but I don't want you to get confused between arrays and lists, guys, so please take careful note that they are very different in places. Okay, so that's the preamble and a lot of waffle there, guys, so I'm sorry about that, but I did think it was quite important really to lay down the caveats and the sort of initial thinking. Right, the Python Monster resources, guys, on Schoology. As always, you have access to videos, to the booklets, some other additional resources, and of course 2 PDFs which give you sight of catalogues which catalogue the videos either in terms of their playlists or with the details that you would see on the relevant YouTube page. Okay, so they are there for you to use. Right, guys, let's crack on and do some examples of Python lists of lists. Okay, guys, so in this demo I'm going to keep it really simple, and then when I've done it I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is that you're actually seeing on the screen. So I'm going to stick with a simple example of just using the integer data type in my lists. Okay, so let's make a start with a variable name for the list, so let's call it, all right, and then I'll start off with putting in the opening and closing brackets, guys, which you've seen a million times before, but because this is a list of lists, inside our individual elements are going to be individual lists. So in here goes my integer values, let's say, all right, so that's the contents, the elements of my first internal list, comma. All right, the second list in my list of lists, let's put 10, 0, minus 9. I'm going to keep the dimensions the same for reasons which will become clear a little bit later. So then we want another comma followed by the contents of our third list. This will be the last list in the list of lists. I promise, guys, to try not to say list of lists too often, all right, because we're both going to get annoyed. So let's pop in here minus 76. Let's do 100. Okay, fairly random numbers, I reckon. Okay, and we've just got an extra square bracket which we don't need there. Okay, so let me just zoom in. All right, so now you can see, guys, why it's called a list of lists. So normally, of course, you will have seen these individual items here separated by a comma as being single data types like a string or an integer or whatever. But of course, because we have essentially lists sorry, lists inside a parent list, if you like, each one of our component elements is now a list in its own right. Now you can see why it's called a list of lists, right, because that's exactly what it is. But of course, what I can do, because I've said before, guys, in videos that Python can be really flexible with the way that you actually format your code. So I'm going to drop this down. Okay, I'm just going to space things out a little bit. Okay, and we can also drop down the end bracket as well. Now, if you've watched the video on arrays, of course, you'd have seen this, because this is where the similarities are. What you can now see, guys, of course, is that we have very much something that looks like a table structure. All right, so a table structure, guys, you're used to thinking about the table structure as being a two-dimensional array. Of course, we are essentially using Python lists to create the same type of table structure. All right, it's just that we're not limited now with the limitations that we had with the array. So at some point in the future, I could add an additional list here to my list, which is of course something we couldn't have done if we were working exclusively with the array data structure. So I have my list, which comprises individual elements, each of which is a list in its own right. So the question then is, how do we drill down and access the individual components of my list? Well, let's do something very simple, guys. Let's just simply print out my list. Okay, and see what that gives us. Right. If you're not sure, guys, if you are in your programming project and you're really not sure how to go about doing something, just keep it simple and then just build the complexity on top. So if we start off with just printing my list and see what that gives us. Okay, and you can see, guys, of course, it's just printed out the native raw components of my list. So the question then is, how can we drill down to the individual lists within my list? Well, what we could do, of course, is we could use the Python collections iteration. All right, so this time I would say, let's say for indi list. Okay, so for individual list or indi. okay, in, and then we want the parent name, which is my list, okay, and then we simply want to print, all right, the lower level component, which is indie list. All right, so let's see what that gives us. All right, and now guys, you can see that it's actually printed down the screen because we are working with the individual component items of my list. Right, so how do we now drill down to index values 0, 1 and 2 of each of our lists within my list? Well, of course, what we could do is we could introduce a nested loop. So now we could say for, and let's say individual comp for individual component, okay, in, and then we want indie list. All right, so for the items within each indie list, and then we want to print out our lower level components, which is indie comp. All right, so for individual components. All right, and let's see what that gives us. Okay, so now on each line we have access to each of the individual integers inside each of our individual lists. So at that level, of course, guys, you've then got a technique now where you can do whatever you want with the individual components inside each of your lists. Okay, so we've drilled right down to the lowest level of detail. What else could I do, guys? If I wanted to access the individual items within each list, I can use unpack. Okay, so let's do an example of this. I'm just going to put some comments in. Let's say using iteration to drill down to the lowest data items. Okay, and let's put in a print here so that we separate the output, and let's put a comment in that says using unpack. Now I could actually, if I wanted to, I could use unpack within the actual iteration, but let's do unpack in the fullest sense of the term. Okay, so using unpack, so unpack, sorry. So what we shall do is we shall assign an individual variable with each individual list inside my list. Okay, so I will say list 1. Right, this is not really practical in the real world, guys, because you might not know how many items there are in your list of lists. Okay, but it's just to show you how this might work. So list 1, and let's say list 2 and list 3, okay, will be assigned the individual values of my list. All right, so what we simply want to say is my list there. All right, okay, and then what we could do for each one of those components, unpacked components, is we could unpack each of those. So for example, what I could say is let's say int 1 comma int 2 comma int 3, all right, is the unpacked version of list 1. All right, so let's see what that gives us. So let's print each of these then. Int 1, okay, let's just sort that out because that's not quite right. There we go. Print int 1, and we want to say print int 2. Okay, and then let's just move all of this up a little bit and print int 3. Okay, so what will that give us? That should give us the individual components of this list here. So we should get 12, 39 and 32 printed out on the screen. So let's see if that works now as we expect it to. And there we go, guys. Right at the bottom, we have 12, 39 and 32 printed out. So I did say earlier, of course, that we could include an unpack within our iteration if we wanted to do that. So how might that work? Let's go up and see if we can improve the code that we've got here. So what we would say, we would say for indie comp in indie list. Okay, so basically that's at too lower a level of detail for us, okay, because we've already got right down there to the individual components. So as we are iterating through each of the lists in turn, all right, I'll just put in here unpack. I keep getting obsessed with unpack for some reason or other. Okay, I don't know why. So let's do something similar. All right, so we'll say int 1 comma int 2 and then int 3, for want of better variable names, guys, is the unpacked version of indie list. All right, and then we can print those out just to show you that it's worked. All right, so obviously guys, in a real programming project, you wouldn't be doing this just to print stuff out. Okay, you'd be using this as your underlying structure to solve some other type of approach to whatever your problem is that you're trying to solve with your programming project. Okay, so we want to print that, and let's print int2. Okay, all right, and let's print int3 again, like we did the last time, but this time of course it's inside our iteration. So this is going to iterate 3 times, so we should get 3 sets of values. So I'll put a blank line print statement in there, guys. Okay, and let's just put in here end of loop. All right, as our code's getting a little bit longer, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. That's better. Okay, and let's see what we get now. Okay, so here you can see, guys, all right, that we have actually here, all right, for each of our lists, we've done an unpack and then we've printed them out in turn. Okay, let me just zoom in a little bit if I can do. There we go. Yeah, so we have unpacked as we've been going through iteration. We've iterated 3 times, all right, and then we've unpacked on 3 occasions, once, twice, and the 3rd time. And if you look over in the actual coding part of the screen, guys, you can see that these correspond to each of our individual lists within my list. Okay, so just to summarize with this, guys, I've shown you how to basically create the structure for a list of lists. I've shown you that simply by reorganizing them in the coding window, you can make it look like a table if that helps you to visualize a list of lists as a table. It's not always helpful to do that, but it depends on the circumstances. You may want to be sticking in your mind with the idea of a table, which is fine, so you can do that too. You have seen something similar when we were working specifically with 2-dimensional arrays, okay, not to confuse you. And what I've also shown you guys is that you could use, originally we did nested iteration so that you could drill right down to the individual elements of each list within my list, and then we did an unpack. Okay, and then we showed you how to do, or I showed you how to do an unpack inside your iteration. Okay, so you can use a combination of features. You can use iteration, and then when you get down to a lower level of individual items, then you can use unpack when you get down to your lowest level of lists. So you can do all of those things, guys, to your heart's content. Okay, so that's it's the end of the first demo. All right, in the next demo, guys, we'll look at something a little bit more complicated. So guys, in this demo, we're going to ask the user for some input, and I'm going to ask the user to input a basic account detail, if you like. Okay, so it'll be first name, surname, probably an email address and a phone number. All right, so a basic, simple summary information of somebody's account. Now what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to create a subroutine to do this, and the reason for that is because it would be a bit hypocritical of me not to. Having said in the playlist on subprograms, students are encouraged to use subprograms in their practical programming projects, so it would be a little bit amiss of me not to do that in one of my own demos. So we're going to create a subprogram. And I should apologize if I say subroutine, guys, okay, because I'm used to saying subroutine for subprograms. OCR uses the name subprograms, okay. So I'm going to create a subprogram in Python which asks the user for input, and then I'm going to collate that and pass it back as a list. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do, I've got the basic comment at the top here, and what I'll do is I'll crack on and create the code, and then I'll pop some suitable comments in along the way as well. So we want to define a subprogram. Okay, and this is going to be a Python function. So we want to say def, let's give it a name. In fact, I'll zoom in as well. Let's say get, and then we'll say just act. Okay, we've got no input parameters, all right, because we're just producing results from the user and passing that back as a return value. All right, so colon and then indentation, guys. So let's put a comment in which says get user account details. All right, so now we want some input statements. So let's say we're going to want to initialize an empty, not initialize, that's naughty. We're going to want to declare an empty list, okay, because we're not initializing it yet with any values. So let's say ret list for return list, okay. So ret list equals nothing at all at the moment, okay. And then what I'm going to want to do at the bottom is to return. Okay, I'm going to want to return ret list. All right, this technique, guys, that you're looking at on the screen, this is called topping and tailing code, and some programmers like to do this, or a combination of different approaches, where they will start at the top and then they'll jump straight to the bottom of the code and define what it looks like when a particular block of code is finished. Okay, so I know that I need to return ret list at the bottom. All right, I've declared ret list as an empty list at the top. I just need to fill out the details now. So what we will do is I will say ret list dot append. Okay, dot append. Okay, and then we're going to want to say in here, this will be our input, so I want to say input, and then we want the prompt, so let's say input, I'll keep it short, input the first value. With first value, let's be a bit more specific, input the first name. Okay, and I've forgotten the brackets are nice, so input comma open bracket the first name, close bracket. Okay, right, so basically we are doing multiple evaluations within functions, guys. Okay, so rather than assigning a variable to the input value, all right, I'm wrapping this up inside the append statement. So essentially what Python will do is, as I've said in previous videos, guys, it starts on the right hand side, okay, and it starts on the inside outwards. The first thing it will do is it will go to the right hand side of the expression. Okay, it will do the input first, all right, and it will collect a value from the user, and then once it's got that value, guys, it will append it to ret list afterwards. And now it's a string data type that I'm after, so I don't need to do any casting here. All right, so that'll be the first name. All right, and then what we want to do is to copy that and pop it in again, because it's almost the same thing. So this will be input the last name. All right, same thing again, guys. Okay, input, let's say the email. All right, and let's do one last one, which will be the phone number. Okay, so input the phone number. So I have saved myself variable names. I've saved myself declaring variable names in this. Okay, so input the phone number, don't we? So let's put phone number. Okay, right, good. Okay, so that's got our list appended with the 4 values that we want to return back, all wrapped up into a single collection. Okay, which is return list. So let's just move this up a little bit. Okay, let's put in a comment to the main program. All right, this works quite well actually, because this subprogram get account is going to be called a number of times. All right, but we can choose how many times to call it and use it in our main program. So it's actually quite a nice example of a subprogram. You know, as subprograms go, this one's actually quite useful. So let's just move this up a little bit, because we don't really need all those gaps. Okay, there we go. Good. Okay, so that looks okay. Now it's saying here, this is PyCharm giving me a little suggestion, and it's saying that I don't really have to initialize that. Okay, but I'm going to leave it in there, guys, because I just think it's good practice to initialize something like a list before you actually start appending values to it. So I am going to leave it there. All right, and this says reformat also if more actions. Oh, it's just a new line. Okay, so I'm not worried about that too much. Right, so that's better. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it's just PyCharm being fussy about my formatting. Right, so what we want, guys, is we want the main program part here. So let's put in across the line comment, guys, so that we can separate, when we look at it, the main program from the subprograms. Okay, so here's our main program, guys. So what's the first thing to do in our main program? We basically want to decide how many individual customer accounts we want to read in. All right, so let's say that we want to do this 3 times. Okay, so let's do for count in range of just 3. All right, so we're going to loop 3 times using a basic for loop. Okay, so get 3 examples of customer accounts. All right, so, and then we want colon. Okay, and then what we want to do, guys, is we want to call get account. Okay, and then we want to append the list that comes back from the subprogram to our list within the main program. Okay, so I'm going to declare a list here. So I'm going to put main list. all right, equals and then nothing, all right, just as we did in our subprogram. And then I'm going to do something similar, guys. I'm going to say main list. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Right, so we want main. This is a problem actually with using a variable name of main, because PyCharm is trying to help out and it's not. So main list.append, okay, and then we want to call the function. All right, so again, guys, I'm using multiple evaluations inside expressions here. Okay, so rather than using a variable value to get back a value from the subprogram, I'm doing it all inside the append statement, just as I did before, okay, inside the append function. So you want to call the program, so it's get account, okay, and that's basically it, guys. Okay, so let's just check this out, make sure it works. Okay, that doesn't like that because it's a it thinks it's a typing error. Okay, so 3 types of customer accounts. There you go, that clears that one. Okay, guys, so that will do nicely. Right, so let's just check our code. Okay, we say here for count looping 3 times. Okay, so an iteration of 3 times. All right, we don't want that in there then, do we? That's naughty. Let's get rid of that. Let's just make sure our indentation's okay. So we want to put main list up here, guys. Okay, so main list. All right, this is where we need to declare it at the top, otherwise it gets initialized every time we go through the loop. All right, let's get that sorted. Main list, there we go. That's better. Right, so we've initialized once main list, and inside our loop we append 3 times with get account. Okay, so that looks like it works. Okay, so let's run that and see what we get. Let's put some user input in. Okay, so input the first name. Let's say let's just move this over, guys, so you can see it a bit better. Right, Peter. Okay, input last name Hall, email ph@email.com, and then we want phone number. Okay, and then here we go again. So let's put Janet, let's put Brown, let's do jb@email.com. Okay, no marks from my imagination, guys, here, obviously. Input phone number. All right, last time then, guys, let's do Liam, and let's put in McDonald. Okay, email address lm@email.com. Okay, phone number. Okay, so that's worked fine, guys. All right, so now that we've done that, let's print out. Okay, let's just simply print out main list. All right, to make sure that that has appended okay to main list. All right, so let's run it again. Okay, so Peter Hall, okay, ph@email.com. All right, phone number. All right, let's do Janet. Oops, and then Brown. I'm trying to be very careful with my typing, guys, so I don't get a syntax error and below the whole thing. Email, let's do jb@email.com. All right, phone number. All right, first name, last one then Liam, and it was McDonald, wasn't it? So MC Donald. Okay, lm@email.com. All right, phone number. Okay, so across the screen, guys, you can see a raw print of the list of lists as is. Okay, so it's just simply printed out the entire list of lists, guys, as it's already structured. Okay, so we haven't drilled down any further into our list at that point, but you can see there, guys, that it has actually appended each of the customer account details to our single list. So I'm pleased with that. It's worked well, okay, as a first go, so that's good. Okay, guys, so what I'm going to do in the next demo, okay, is we're going to use this existing demo, and we're going to start looking at ways in which we can find specific information within our 3 customer account details. Okay guys, so I did notice while I was just checking through the video for the last demo that actually the green input on the off black background is actually quite hard to read. So I've changed that, so in this demo it should be easier to see whatever input we need to put in on behalf of the user. So what we're going to do in this demo is we're going to make use of index values. You've seen that done with arrays, but equally we can make use of the index values for Python lists, because they too are sequentially organized with index values starting at 0. So we can make good use of that. So excuse me. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user for a surname or a last name to search on. So the first thing we need to do then is we need to ask the user for some input. So with a comment, let's say ask the user for a last name to search for. All right, and let's call this search item, and that becomes, guys, then we of course we want input as usual with a prompt, so please input the name to search for. Okay, and then my usual bits at the end. All right, so that's been searched to search item, assigned to search item, I should say. So what could we do, guys? There's a number of ways that we could go about doing this. The way that I'm going to choose is to iterate through the main list and then drill down just as far as we get to the individual items. All right, so that's each individual list. And then for each individual list, I'm going to search at index position 1, which is where the surname is stored. All right, and that's the same for all of our account details. So let's start off with our for loop. Okay, not for loop, we're going to use a collections loop. So collections loop. And then we're going to say for, and we want a variable name. So let's say, excuse me, indie list in, and then we, of course, we want main list. All right, so that drills down as far as our individual list, and then we'll say something like if, and then we want indie list at index position 1, okay, is equal to the value that the user has given us, which is search item. All right, then we want to do something, don't we? So let's say print name found in the accounts. Okay, we'll leave it at that just for the moment. We could update that to make it a a little bit more informative later, guys, but let's see if this works first of all. All right, so here I'm going to say end of if, okay, and then here we want end of let's get rid of that. That's better. End of loop or iteration, let's say. There we go. Right, so let's pop in some values again. So let's run this. Okay, so input the first name, Peter, and then Hall. Okay, and let's do ph@gmail.com. Phone number. All right, let's do Janet Brown again. Oops. Janet Brown, let's do jb@email.com. Phone number, and let's do one more, let's do Liam again. Okay, email and phone number. Okay, and excuse me, guys. This is asking us to search on a name. So what should we choose, guys? Let's try Brown. And it says name found in the accounts. Okay, so that looks like that works. Okay, we don't have any errors there. So we want to provide a little bit more information, don't we? So how about providing more details of the particular search surname that's been searched for and found? All right, so let's do that then. So how do we provide extra information? Well, let's put underneath here, let's do an unpack. That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it? So let's do first name, comma, okay, and then last name, and let's do email, and let's do tel for telephone. Okay, and that equates to, let's just space those out a little bit better. There we go. And that equates to, guys, unpacking the list that we're looking at the moment, which is indie list. Okay, so that's indie list, and let's do print. Okay, and let's say first name, keeping it simple, guys, okay, because I don't really want to focus on formatting too much, because that's not really the real purpose of the demo. So let's do last name. All right, and let's print, we want email, and last but not least we want tel, don't we? Okay, and print tel. Okay, so that should do the trick. So name found in accounts, and then it prints out the unpacked assignments to each of our variables. So that should do quite nicely. So let's test this again then. Okay, so first name, ph@email.com. Okay, Janet Brown. Okay, and then we want phone number. All right, and then last but not least, him again. Email, phone number. Okay, input the name to search for. Okay, so let's choose this time. Let's do Hall for Peter. Okay, and then it says name found in accounts, Peter Hall. There's the email address and the phone number. Okay, guys, so we've made use of indexing in this particular example just to show you that we can apply that technique in a similar way to what we did with arrays, all right? Because the lists share that property with arrays. They are indexed starting from 0 and sequentially, so we can do that as well. And of course, in there, in addition to using an index value, we've used a traditional Python list technique, guys, which is to unpack. So guys, in this demo, I thought it might be an idea for us to do some file handling, and there are two reasons for that. The first one is because if we collate perhaps 3 or 4 different examples of accounts and put those in a text file, then we can treat them very much as records, if you like. And one of the best ways for us to store records is in a list of lists, or of course, if you're working with traditional arrays, it would be a 2-dimensional array. The other reason also, guys, is because very often when you are given your practical programming assignment to work with, there is a file handling requirement in there for you either to read from or to write to a text file, and possibly even both. So that's one of the reasons why I thought we would wrap this in with lists of lists, okay, and to see how that might work. So we're going to extend the previous demo. We're going to write some account details to a text file, and we're going to create a delimited example of data, guys. So it looks like this. Let me just open up accounts.txt, and you can see this on the screen. Essentially, this is a CSV file format. In other words, it's a comma separated set of values, and you can see there, guys, that I've used the comma as our delimiter, and the comma separates individual values without any spaces. So we're going to write a program to read those in. Okay, so we're going to use typical file handling, and then we are going to assign each of the records, if you like, in our text file, each of our records of account data into a list of lists. And I'm also going to write that as a subprogram. So we're going to get a subprogram to pass back the entire collection to the main program. Okay, so let's close that down. By the way, guys, if you're a bit rusty with file handling, you will find the file handling videos specifically around delimited data as number 34 and 35, which are on the file handling with Python playlist. So do have a visit through those, guys, okay, if you are a little bit rusty with file handling. All right, so let's close that down then, guys, and let's crack on, and let's get some code down. So I've made a little start with a comment there, and the first thing that I want to do really is to define a subprogram. So let's give it a name. Let's call it, actually let's put a comment in first. Let's put in subprogram 2 get. There we go, that'll do nicely, apart from the typos, guys, as usual. So account data from a text file. Okay, we need to give it a name, we need to define it. So let's do def, and we'll call it get_ax. All right, no input parameters, guys, okay, because it's just reading from the file, packaging up the data and sending it back to the main program. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to do the standard file handling syntax. So we want to open the file to read. All right, and the standard syntax, guys, for that is we want to say with open bracket, close bracket. Okay, then we want a nickname, so I will call it my file, which is my standard nickname, if you like. And then we want the colon. What goes in the brackets, guys? We want the file name, which will be account.txt, and then we want the mode, which will be read only, because we're not doing any writing. Okay, and the first thing that we normally do is we read in the first line from the file, okay, before we do any iteration. That's the sort of standard approach that we take. So I need a variable name, let's call it line. All right, lack of imagination, I know, guys. And then we want my nickname, which is my file, and then the keyword that we use is read line, or that's the one that I've recommended in all the videos, guys. All right, out of the various Python techniques you can use, read line is probably the best. And then we can do our iterations. So let's do comment while not EOF. All right, so this is the Python equivalent, and we want to say while line does not equal, okay, and then we want a null value. So that's our two commas back to back. All right, and then we've got our own iteration block that requires the colon there, guys. So the first thing I need to do, this is standard practice, guys, when we read in lines in multiple lines from a text file, is you're going to have a new line escape character at the end, which is going to show up when we start writing stuff to lists. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to strip off the hidden escape character for a new line. All right, and we're going to use the strip function, Python function for that. I will use the same variable name, so I will say line becomes a new assignment to line, and that'll be line dot, and then we want strip. Okay, and then we want the character, which, guys, will be a \n. All right, so that will take off that unwanted character from the existing string that we've just read in. All right, then what we want to do is we want to take our single string, which is split by commas, and then we want to use the delimiter, okay, to assign individual values to a list. All right, and we use the dot split Python function for that, okay, along with the delimiter. So I'll say line becomes, again, the new version of line will be dot split. All right, and then we need to specify the delimiter, which is a comma. Okay, then what we need to do is we need to do something with line, and I need to append line to a list, which I haven't actually declared, so I need to do that. So I will call it, let's call it sublist, all right, which equals nothing at all. All right, just the structure that we require for our data structure. All right, so let me put an extra comment in here and, okay, declare a list structure. There we go. And so what we can do now, guys, is we can say sublist, all right, dot append. All right, so going to append the list with a child list, if you like, and that list, guys, will be line, of course, okay, because we've now converted that from a string to an actual list with string values in. Okay, so we're almost there, I think. We need to read the next line in, don't we? Okay, so easy to forget to do that. Line becomes then the next line in the file, which is my file, of course, dot, and then we want read line again. All right, so that's it for our while statements. Let's put here end of while loop as a comment. This will be the end of file handling. So really I ought to put at the beginning there close file, right, because Python does that for us automatically. Close file and end of file handling, guys. Okay, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. There we go. And that means that we're outside that block now, which is where we need to return. So let's do return, and then we are, of course, returning sublist, guys, aren't we, to our main program. So let's put a comment in here. Return list. Okay, and then once we finish, guys, we're right up against the margin again, because that is the end of the sub program. Okay, good. So let me zoom out, because we need to start looking for space for our main program now. All right, so here I'm going to put across the screen comment so that we can easily see where our main program starts. Not so bad with just the one subprogram, guys. Okay, but this is a useful little trick when you have loads of subprograms. Okay, right, so main program is here, guys. So we want to assign the value which is the result of a call to our function. So let's say main list again. All right, so I'm expecting back everything that's been read in from that file, and then we want the name of the function, guys. Okay, so let's put in here call get ax, okay, and assign return list of lists. There we go. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to do something with this. So let's just space that out, guys. Okay, so Python doesn't moan at me for lines. Let's just get rid of these spell stuff again as well. Okay, there we go. All right, so my main line is main list, sorry, is assigned the collection that comes back from get accounts. Okay, so what I'm going to do just initially is I'm just going to test. All right, just going to put test content, then we're just going to print out the raw main list structure, guys, with the content. Okay, so I just want print. All right, and then let's do main list. All right, and hopefully that should work okay. So let's run this to see what we get. Oh, that looks good. Let me just move this over, guys. Okay, so there we have a print across the screen of our raw list content and structure, guys. Okay, so it's just a linear print across the screen, and that looks like it's ready and everything. Okay, if I just scroll across, guys, as far as I can, we've also got Alice Bridge there as well, but she's off the recording window, guys, but she is there. You'll be pleased to know, I'm sure. Right, so now we've done that, then let's do something that we did similarly. All right, let's ask the user to give us something to search for, guys. Okay, what I think we will do, guys, though, is we will use the equivalent of searching for an occurrence of characters, like searching for the with the keyword like, for example. Okay, so it will pick up on a not exact match. Right, so let's do that then. We've got print main list, so I'm going to get rid of that because we've done our little test there. So we want to loop through our main list so that we can access each of our individual lists in turn. So we can use a collections iteration for that, guys, as usual. Okay, so let's put use all right, so use Python collections iteration. So we want to say for indie list again, okay, and this time we want to say main list. All right, so now we've drilled down as far as our individual list. It would help, actually, wouldn't it, if we actually asked the user for some input first of all. Let's do that then, guys. All right, so let's ask the user, okay, for a search item, okay, as we did last time, guys. Okay, so we want a name, search equals, and then we want input, guys, of course, and let's do prompt, please input. Okay, and let's do last name, the last name to search. Okay, and then we just want our usual 2 arrows at the end, guys. Okay, good, so we've got that now. So for indie, let's just move this over, actually, because we don't need all that on the end. There we go. For indie list in main list, okay, then we want to say just like we did before, guys, so we want to say if name search, okay, but this time, okay, we want to use in, okay, because we're looking for an occurrence of where it might actually be in a particular string item. Okay, so the particular string item that we want, guys, of course, as per last time, is indie list at position 1. Okay, but we're not going to do a test for an exact match, so we're going to say if main search is in this time. All right, and then we want to say indie list at position 1. Okay, all right, so that will give us occurrences of as well as an exact match, and then we want to say print. We'll do what we did last time, but I'm going to add in f-string formatting as well in this example, guys, because I just thought I did this something similar in the file handling playlist, and this will just make the output look a little nicer, and as it's the last demo as well, I think we'll do that. So let's just put an intro print. Let's say item found, Okay, so name found, or actually let's put in here input found in name. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to do a formatted search, sorry, not a formatted search, we want to do a formatted print on that particular list. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set up a variable which we are going to use print formatting on, F formatting, but we're going to have to do that on the individual items that have been unpacked from the list. So let's do an unpack, guys. So let's do first name, okay, comma, last name, like we did before. Okay, let's do email. We want email and telephone number, don't we? So we want email, and then we'll do phone. Okay, equates to the unpacked version of indie list. All right, there we go. All right, now we can actually do some F string formatting with those variable names in place. So we want to say str format. Okay, and then that needs to be assigned, and then we want to say F. Okay, and then we want our set of double quotes, guys. So if I just zoom in, let's just move up and zoom in, guys. There we go. And I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Okay, so this is the start of F string formatting. Okay, so in here we want to say in slinky brackets we want the name of the variables. So we want to put in first name here. Okay, and then we want to put in slinky brackets our last name. Okay, and same for all of these guys. Okay, we want email. All right, and then we want phone. There we go. Okay, so that should give us a nice formatted list. Not list, that's probably the wrong word, isn't it? String would be better. It gives us a formatted string with all of the variable names intact, and we don't need to do any casting, guys, and we don't need any concatenation either. All right, so we've got our string there. So all we need to do is we need to print out our special string, which is string format. Okay, and I think that works quite nicely. Let's double check. So we've got print input found in name. All right, and then we've got first name, last name, email, phone equals indie list, and then we've got string format, F with double quote. Okay, and I think, yeah, I think that should do okay. I'm just going to put a bit of a space between these, okay, just to pad them out a little bit, and then we print off. Okay, right, guys, let's try that and see what we get. Okay, and let's just move it over, guys, because I've got to put this input. Now, we had, I think in the text version, guys, we had brown. Okay, so I'm just going to type in BR. Okay, and there it says it shows you guys that BR has actually been shown as a substring. We've actually used this as a substring of brown. All right, so there we've got input found in name. We've got Janet Brown. Okay, and then the details, guys, and we've got input found in name Alice Bridge as well. Okay, I hadn't thought of that when I typed in BR, but that's obviously worked in a way which I subconsciously planned for, guys. So we've got two matches of the substring BR. BR has been found in brown, and BR, of course, in bridge as well. I guess what we ought to do, guys, is we ought to put some comment in there if not found, shouldn't we, really? So let's put in here else. Okay, and let's do an appropriate print, which just says print. Okay, and let's put input not found. Okay, right, okay, and then I can put here, guys, end of if, and I ought to put on here end of loop down at the bottom. Okay, right, so let's test this with something we know is going to be not found. Okay, so please input a last name to search. Let's put in something silly like XX. Okay, and oh, it's printed input not found for all lines. Okay, don't really want that, guys, do we? Actually, that's a bit messy. So let's go back and see if we can improve our code. So what, guys, what could we do then to improve this? Because what's happening is we're getting really a messy output. It's basically saying that it hasn't found it on each iteration. So what could we do to improve that? Well, one of the things we could do is we could set up a Boolean value as a flag. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to take that out because clearly that doesn't work the way that we intended it to, or at least I'm going to take out this bit here. Okay, so Boolean flag would say right at the top here, all right, we're going to set a variable called found, and we're going to set that to false. Okay, All right, so variable found equals false. Right, so what happens then, guys, if no, actually, let's set it to true. Okay, that would be better. Let's set it to true. We'll get rid of the else here. All right, so we're not going to do anything inside the loop, guys, apart from say that if it's found, okay, no, it was right, wasn't it? It's false. Okay, so if it's found, guys, then we set found. We set that to true. All right, to say that it's been found on one or more occasions, guys. That'll be fine. Okay, so found equals true. Let's get rid of this. All right, and then what we want to say is this will be the end of if. Okay, end of if block, and then we've got end of loop. All right, so what we want to say at the end of our loop, guys, when we finish iterating, we want to say if not found. Okay, then we want to print out, guys. Okay, search item not found. Okay, print. Is that going to work? Okay, so it starts off at false. It will always be false if we don't find anything at all. As soon as we find one or more occurrences, guys, then found is changed and remains to true. And so the only time this will be printed out is if we have gone through the entire iteration and never found a match. Okay, and I do want to find all matches, guys, so I don't want to break anywhere in this. All right, so I want to complete the full iteration. Okay, so let's run that and see if this looks a little bit better now. All right, so let's put in something silly again. Okay, and there we go, search item not found. Let's do another one that's positive, guys. Okay, so let me just open, let's just open accounts and see what we can, oops. Let's just move that over a little bit, guys. Not quite sure what's happened there. Right, that's back. That's better. I've got it back. Right, so let's open up accounts.txt. Let's see what we can search for. So what can we search for on the surname? We could search on AL, couldn't we? Because that should pick up AL in Hall, and it should also pick up AL in McDonald as well, guys. Okay, so let's search on AL. All right, so let's close that down. So let's do AL. Okay, and it does work. So we have input found in name Peter Hall, okay, and input name found in name Liam McDonald. And of course, guys, it hasn't printed out search item not found because, of course, at some point in our iteration, found has been changed from false to true. So that's worked okay. Right, guys, so I hope that's all been useful for you. You've had a good insight, I think, as to how to use lists to create a sort of table structure. We call them list of lists. You can see that there's been some similarity with arrays, but we've used a lot more of the Python features which are exclusively for lists rather than arrays, guys. Okay, you've seen us use file handling, and we have used an index value on a couple of occasions, and we've also made pretty good use of the Python collections iteration syntax as well, and unpacking too. All right, so I hope that's all been useful for you. Right, guys, I will see you in the next video.